We're here today in the round pen with a 2-year-old filly we call Bunny. She's by a horse named Firefox Jet. He is a World Show placed quarter horse, heading horse, has a bunch of quarter horse points. He's a roping horse, but he's bred to be a race horse. So is this filly on both sides. I don't care. I think that can be a good thing. A few things you have to work around with that. But like any young horse, one of the first lessons they learn is how to flex and give their head and neck. So I'm going to show you actually 4 different ways to install that in them that you can use on pretty much any horse. Now the first one is the classical way that very many clinicians and sort of horsemanship based people espouse, and I'm certainly not against it, but it's sort of a static flex. The horse is standing still and you see if you can bend their head laterally. Now this filly's had virtually none of this done, so I'm going to see if I can get her started. So she's leaning a little bit. If she gives me enough that she doesn't weigh anything, I'll turn her loose, but you can see that she's a bit stiff. So what I don't want to do is move my hand, and ideally I would have it anchored somewhere there. There you go. But you can see that took a while, and I would do the same thing to the right. That is often what people do again and again and again, and in fact, your horse will learn to give to that. But it's kind of a laborious process that they go through and you just outlast them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm going to show you a couple of alternatives that let you kind of break the ice and then come back to that. The first one is, I gotta say, it's not something I've seen anybody else do. I'm not claiming it as a great invention, but I'm not sure how well it would work for everybody else because I haven't seen it tried by everybody else. But I refer to this sometimes as cradling. I always handle my horses' heads and necks a lot to where they're not going to be belligerent if I take a hold of them. So when I want to flex her, I'll simply take my hand over here, my other hand up here, and use my body as kind of a wraparound. And take her head over and just cradle her kind of in my arms until she softens up. There, she just softened up. And you do have more surface area that you're working with. You have body-to-body contact. And if your horse knows you and trusts you and is respectful to you as well, they kind of feel reassured by this. So I'll just reach up here. See, and you can see it's easier this time. She's distracted by a terrible lot of insects. There we go. There we go. And she's comfortable there, and I'll release her. And you'll notice she doesn't snap her head back immediately like a rubber band. She just kind of moves it over gradually back to neutral. But you can do that as much as you want. Now, if you've got a belligerent, difficult horse or an extremely dull horse, this is probably, on the one hand, a waste of time, and on the other hand, not real safe. If you're gonna take a hold of your horse and their next move is to knock out every tooth in your head, you better be able to diagnose that in advance. Now, she's not being bad, but there's a bunch of little sweat bees sailing around. They don't bite, but they do aggravate. Now there we go. So you can see what we're getting, and that starts a little different look. And what you can do is eventually kind of make it simpler and just take your one hand over there and move her head around. Now, certainly that's not the way you're going to ride her, But it gives her the idea of what that motion is, and I think it's reassuring to her. And if nothing else, it's a golden opportunity. You've got her head kind of captured, and if you want to check out her ears, make sure they're safe to work with, and you use a little caution, you can throw a little bit of that in as well. But that's an odd little thing that I do that not many people do. If you're 5'2" and you've got an 18-hand warm blood, you may want to use scaffolding or not do it. But it's the kind of thing that with the right horse and rider combination or handler combination, it's just, to me, a very satisfying way to introduce this. And often I'll do this much younger in their life. And she's been handled like this a little bit, but hasn't really been flexed around like this. So that's one thing you can do. Now what's interesting, and I'm just going to work on her on the left primarily. That way it's no different on the other side, although typically you would work both sides. But for video purposes, I'll just do that side. Now let's see if that in itself has softened her up a bit compared to the way she was before. So you see where her head goes and how much more easily she begins to flex over. Now, is she going back? Clinton Anderson says, you want to get their nose back against their rib cage. Number one, I don't ever need that amount of bend. I think the horse almost always twists their neck out of shape to get into that position. And number two, I sure don't need it right away. That's not me taking a shot at Clinton Anderson. God knows he can say or do whatever he wants, and he does much of it very, very well. But I don't agree with that component. Everything he's doing, just not the degree. So let's see if we can just take our head around with that static flex. And you can see it's a lot easier now than it was before I did that simple little thing with her. Now, a second thing that you can do, and this works a lot of different things at once. You go to the opposite side of your horse. You take, and this is a completely new idea to her, I think. Take your line here. You want to make sure your line's long enough. And you take it down over her hip, basically down to her hock. And then you put a little pressure on her and you let her find her way through. So there comes her head, there comes the back end, and the front end comes through. So you're combining a lot of things there, and it's pretty efficient. And it also desensitizes them to having things around their back end, around their hocks. They learn to bend, and they learn to do it in motion. See, that static flex is a little bit of a delusion because it's sure a different thing when you do it in motion. So I'm going to stand up here, put a little tension on her, and let her figure it out. Let her figure it out. There she goes. There she goes. Come on. So she's a little troubled this time. Go on. Move your front end. And then she figures it out. That's very good for this filly because she has a tendency to get really tight when she's worried, and she tends to worry. So that's a real good thing to do with her. And you can do it as many times as you want. Now I'll warn you, there is a moment in this that you're a little bit exposed. So if you've got a horse who lives to kick anything that gets close to him, you may want to work on that before you introduce this. But you can see, and there's your exposure, but you can see it now makes sense to her. And that's rewarding to me, maybe even a little rewarding to her. So that's the bend around like that. It's really effective, it's real simple, and it's done in motion. It moves their back end away and their front end through. It's a very good little exercise that a lot of guys use. It's certainly in no way original to me, not at all. First time I saw it done was by Ray Hunt back in the 90s. And certainly he had been doing it and others had been doing it for a while. So another thing that you can do, some people will tie their horse's head to their tail. Well, I don't like tying to tails, although I've done it, and I would still do it in an inappropriate case. But most of the time, I don't like that because you don't really give them a release. You just have their head tied around and they don't really get a release. So here, I'm gonna tail bend her. I've got her by the tail, and then see how her front end's locked? Well, I'm gonna chase her with her own tail. Do you see the position that she takes? And then I give her some slack. But see, there's the release that they don't get when you have them tied mechanically around. Now, can they jerk you off your feet? Can they do all sorts of nasty things? Yeah, but you can do this with a pretty green one. You don't want to turn it into a pulling contest because you'll lose. And see how she wants to just move her back end? Well, I drive her with her own tail. Now she's got kind of a sorry tail. But see, she's starting to get up, taking a true stride, and she's bent. Oh, she's not bent around like a donut, but she's bent in the right arc for that circle, which is almost automatic if you're bending their nose to match their tail. Their body in the middle is going to be pretty consistent. There you go, girlie. So that tail bending, that's also a good thing to do because it's in motion. You can give them a release and it bends their entire body. So I like that a whole lot. And there are a bunch of other things that you can do, but those three items really affect a horse's willingness to give. Now let's see, we've done a couple of more things with her. Let's see if by doing something besides just outlasting her in a static flex, whether her static flex has gotten better. And you see how much easier she is? So instead of just dragging on her and outlasting her and holding her till she gives in, my goal is to get her to where she understands that the right thing to do is to put herself in the coordinated athletic position that she is bred and made to assume. And those three little exercises help her to get back to where you can use this static flex as a test and see how you're progressing. But see, that's just monumentally better than it was when we started, and that is enough for today. I'm going to say something else that's a little sort of outside the box. So the typical wisdom is now do everything on the right side. And I did say that typically you would. Today with this filly, I wouldn't. She learned it on this side today. She can learn it on the right side tomorrow. I don't need to overload her boat by trying to tick every box in one day. Let's stop on a good note, which is where we are. Hope this was interesting to you, and I hope these are things you can use. It will help any horse in any stage if they've got a degree of stiffness in them. Give it a try. Let us know how it worked.